Today we're going to talk about European politics, and I know what you're already thinking. What a dumpster fire. Has anyone ever said, hey, everything in Europe is going great? Not that I don't like Europe, I think it's a great place, but the way they got it set up over there, everyone knew it was bound to fail from the beginning. And the setup I'm talking about is the Eurozone. When you have extremely different economies, you don't try to tie them all together under one monetary system. It doesn't make sense. And again, this isn't a shocker because literally every economist said this is a bad idea. This isn't going to work long term. But now every year, what do? We just wait for more bad news to come out of Europe. And the latest blow up that we're watching is Italy. Ray Dalio just released a new article as a LinkedIn influencer, the best influencer you could be, all about Italy and Mario Draghi. And in classic Dalio fashion, as you'll see, is he will identify the problem and say that it's coming and give absolutely no potential solutions to how it can be solved. Apart from, hey, maybe if all of us were more rational and can communicate better, then we won't have these problems, which we know isn't a realistic solution because humans aren't rational and we're not going to communicate. So it's always funny reading Dalio's research because it's good, but it's always like he's the guy just pointing at a train saying, yep, it's going to crash. And everyone's like, okay, what do we do? How do we prevent it from crashing? And he's like, nah, there's nothing you could do. You know, maybe if it wasn't a train, then it wouldn't be a train crash. Thanks, Dalio. So helpful. But at least he's able to give us the roadmap of how it happens, why it happens, how it happened before in the past, and how it'll happen again in the future. So that way we can be informed train wreck watchers. And I know a lot of you have informed opinions on Italian politics, and some of you are from Italy, and European economics in general, so I'd love to hear your thoughts down below. But okay, what's happening with Mario Draghi and Italy? And Mario Draghi, as you know, is the Prime Minister of Italy. So as Dalio says, it's another one of those classic cases in which a country's lack of discipline and fragmented leadership have led to a combination of 1. Excess debts, 2. A lot of internal conflict, and 3. In this case, a big external conflict with the war between Russia and Ukraine. So together, these forces make Italy vulnerable to a debt financial crisis and de facto anarchy. So you know Dalio has a game plan for how this all works out because he wrote a bunch of books about it. So in his template for a cycle of internal orders and disorders, Italy is classically in stage 4 of the cycle. And the reason it's interesting to look at is because this isn't only going to happen to Italy, it's going to happen to many other countries as well, because this all ties back into that long-term debt cycle, and we're at the bottom of that long-term debt cycle. So this is when we get a lot of political problems, a lot of war. Think back to the Great Depression, World War II, it's those types of times. So Dalio asks the question with Mario Draghi, because the Italians have to choose their leadership, right? So are the Italians going to choose smart bipartisan leadership that will require people with different perspectives to not get exactly what they want? Meaning, will people choose to compromise, or will they choose dysfunctional fighting for exactly what they want? Meaning, not compromise and just yell at each other and say, hey, I want this and you're wrong. Now, why Dalio asked this question? I don't know, because it's a rhetorical question. We know what people are going to choose. It's the same thing they're choosing everywhere. They are going to fight, and they are going to be irrational, because that's what people do. So when Draghi was elected, he accepted the job on the condition that he would have nonpartisan support, meaning support from all sides. But as you'll see in a second, that's changing now. And it's now the case in most democratic countries, especially the United States. The choice is between becoming more unified and supporting a smart bipartisan leader so that we could get things working, so both sides work together, which would require people with different perspectives to not get exactly what they want, but will give them more compromised outcomes in which the system remains intact and works better. Meaning you compromise so that you could get things done. You don't get exactly what you want, but both parties meet in the middle and it works out. Do we remember that concept at all? Well, no, maybe not. Or you choose the dysfunctional fighting for exactly what you want, which gives ineffective decision making and a greater risk of some kind of civil war. And Dalio, if you've read his stuff, he's always gunning for a civil war. But he's the guy with the history, so it seems to happen a lot. Not like it hasn't happened before in the US. So we'll see. Now, over the 18 months that Draghi had his job, the world changed. So we know that the central banks created a ton of money in debt. The war in the Ukraine came, inflation accelerated, and the European Central Bank's free money policy proved inconsistent with its mandate to control inflation. Because all central banks got to control that inflation, right? But because inflation is getting out of control, they're preparing to raise their rates. But if they raise their rates, we know that that's going to hurt Italy and other big debtors' abilities to service their debts. Because a lot of these countries, like Italy, have a ton of debt. So when interest rates go up, it's more difficult to pay off that that debt. But it's going to force Italy to raise their interest rates as well, which could cause that debt and currency crisis that we hate. Now, from a broader perspective, Dalio thinks that we're clearly in phase 3 of the classic big debt cycle. And this is when the central banks face the choices between A, allowing money and credit to tighten and interest rates to rise, which will depress most economies, especially those that are over indebted. So that's what we've already been experiencing this whole year, right? The Federal Reserve raising interest rates and our stock market crashing and us heading for a recession. That's what happens. Or the other choice that central banks have, which is the easier choice and the more popular choice, is keep printing money. That way you help the people that have the most debt keep servicing that debt, and you keep real interest rates artificially low. And what does that do? Well, it devalues your money, heightens inflation, and increases debt. And doing that is basically the equivalent of kicking the can down the road, which will make the problem worse when we eventually come to it. But again, when it comes to politics, what you got to do is what's good for you in the time being so that you can get reelected, and then push all your problems as far out as you can until you're out of office. And you got a nice consulting gig where they pay you a bunch of money. That's the way politics works. Don't actually solve anything. That's stupid. Right now, everyone in Europe is basically participating in option number 2. Now, what's been happening recently in Italy is that Draghi has been losing his partisan support. Last week, the second largest political party in Italy, the Five Star Party, pulled out of the coalition supporting him. And Draghi sensibly said, hey, if that happens, I guess I'm going to resign. Resigning pretty much makes the most sense for him, even though it's going to make things worse for Italy over the short term. Now, again, though, in Dalio's opinion, this makes perfect sense for Draghi because history and logic made clear that being a leader of a country in which the people are hell-bent on fighting with each other and tearing down bipartisan efforts, well, it's just pointless. It's like trying to fight the tide. You're not going to get anything done and everyone's going to hate you. Again, history and logic make it clear that in a democracy in which there are both weak fundamentals that are leading to painful circumstances, meaning like a bad economy, and on top of that, fragmentation in political decision-making, meaning no one can agree and everyone's fighting, well, whoever's leading that mess is going to be considered a failed leader. So Draghi stepping down, yeah, probably a good idea. The thing that you need in a situation like this is a smart and strong leader who tries to help the most amount of people, rather than just having a leader that's trying to lead one faction against the other faction. But again, unless you're playing to your party, you're not going to get elected into the spot in the first place. And this is what I'm talking about when Dalio doesn't actually give any solutions other than people should be more rational and they should communicate better, which, of course, never going to happen. So it is, once again, just looking at the train wreck happen. So the classic biggest risk to democracy comes when there are bad conditions like we have now and great fragmentations, because that often leads to some form of anarchy and civil war that inevitably leads to the rise of autocratic leadership that takes control of things to make trains run on time. And again, we're talking about Italy here, right? And what's going to happen to them, but they are not the only ones that are going to go through this. Next up is Brazil, and it's going to happen all over the place. So what's needed in times of difficulty and fragmentation is strong leadership that fixes things. History and logic show that that typically only happens after a fight when the winner, who through some mix of suppression of the opposition and giving benefits to his supporters to make them happy, gains broad-based support and has capabilities and powers to do the best things for the most people in the country. It would of course be so much better if democracies could produce the strong leaders who fix things without having the destructive fighting, but it seems illogical to expect that. But still, it's something worth striving for. So what do you think about the situation in Europe and how it's going to play out? Make sure you comment down below. And I don't actually expect you to have a solution. I mean, Dalio doesn't have a solution. In reality, there probably is no solution. It is just watching it happen, which sucks. And once you're done commenting down below, make sure you watch this video right here where we talk about Uber and Elon Musk. They break laws, but breaking those laws actually help our society. So should they be punished for it? I want to hear your thoughts on that too. So after you're done here, click here and I will see you in that video.